I never imagined the glint in a child's eyes could hold a secret heavier than any dust I'd ever swept away. My hands, calloused from years of scrubbing other people's grime, had grown accustomed to the burn of bleach and the ache in my lower back, but nothing prepared them for the weight of a conscience stirred to its core. My name is Maria. I came to this country, to this sprawling, indifferent city of New York, chasing a sliver of the American dream, or at least enough of it to send back to my ailing mother in Guatemala. Most days, that dream felt like a cruel mirage, shimmering just beyond reach, especially when I was on my hands and knees, cleaning someone else's sprawling mansion in Westchester. This particular Tuesday, the chill of early autumn was already biting, and the promise of a new, well-paying client had me bundled in my worn fleece jacket, clutching my oversized tote bag filled with supplies as I navigated the winding, tree-lined streets of an exclusive gated community. The houses here weren't just big, they were monuments to success, silent titans of glass and stone, each one whispering tales of fortunes built and lives perfectly curated. The Sterling residence, a modern minimalist marvel of steel and glass, was no exception. It stood on a manicured acre, a fortress of prosperity that somehow felt cold, despite the warm glow spilling from its numerous windows. My first impression of Mrs. Sterling, a woman whose diamonds seemed to gleam brighter than her smile, was that she was a whirlwind of designer clothes and clipped instructions. She was a CEO, I gathered, of some high-tech firm, always on her phone, her voice a precise, confident hum. Mr. Sterling, I was told, was often away on business. A common story in these parts. My job was straightforward, meticulous cleaning, twice a week, no corner left untouched. I prided myself on my thoroughness, a skill honed by necessity. I was reliable, invisible, and efficient. That was my role. The first few hours were a blur of polished marble, gleaming chrome, and the faint scent of expensive air fresheners. The house was spotless on the surface, a testament to the previous cleaner, I supposed, but I knew where to look for the hidden layers of dust, the overlooked crevices. It was during one of these meticulous explorations, as I was carefully dusting a towering bookshelf filled with art books and pristine first editions, that I first saw her, Lily. She was perhaps 7, maybe 8, tiny for her age, with wispy blonde hair and eyes the color of a stormy sky. She sat on the vast living room floor, a splash of vibrant color in a sea of muted tones, surrounded by a dozen untouched, brightly colored building blocks. She wasn't playing, she was just sitting there perfectly still, staring at them as if they were alien objects. The silence she carried was profound, heavier than the silence of the empty rooms I'd just cleaned. It made the grand house feel even larger, more isolating. Mrs. Sterling breezed through the room, her voice echoing from a phone receiver. "Yes, darling, I know, it's Tuesday, Nanny's with her, don't you worry." She didn't spare Lily a glance, didn't break stride. Lily didn't move. My stomach clenched. It was a familiar pang, a flicker of empathy that had no place in my professional routine. My job was to clean, not to observe. But Lily's stillness, her absolute lack of engagement with the vibrant toys surrounding her, was unsettling. Later, as I moved to the kitchen, a cathedral of stainless steel and granite, I saw Lily again. She was perched on a stool at a massive island, a bowl of untouched cereal before her. The nanny, a young woman with a perpetually bored expression, was engrossed in her phone, headphones firmly in place. Lily's spoon lay beside the bowl, forgotten. She was watching me, her gaze unwavering, curious but also distant. I offered a small, hesitant smile. Her lips barely twitched in response. My first thought was that perhaps she was shy or unwell, but something in her eyes, a wisdom far beyond her years, suggested something deeper. It was a silent plea, I realized later, though at the time I couldn't quite decipher its meaning. This was the first fissure, the moment the gleaming facade of the Sterling household began to crack, not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of a child's profound loneliness. As I cleaned the family room, with its enormous flat-screen TV and plush, untouched sofas, a wave of discomfort washed over me. I remembered my own childhood, filled with noise and laughter, surrounded by cousins and siblings. It was a world away from this sterile, silent grandeur. My own mother, despite our poverty, had always made sure we were fed, loved, and never alone. Mrs. Sterling, on another phone call, her voice carrying from the adjacent office, mentioned something about Lily's moods and how she was just going through a phase. It was said with an edge of annoyance, not concern, a micro-trigger, a tiny shard of insight that pricked at my professional detachment. Lily, I observed, always ate alone, always played alone, or rather sat alone amidst her toys. Even when the nanny was present, her attention was elsewhere. The silence that clung to Lily wasn't shyness. It was a profound isolation, a chasm that stretched through the gleaming hallways of her opulent home. I found myself instinctively leaving the cleaning supplies in a different corner, just a little further from where Lily might wander. A small, unconscious act of protection. It felt absurd, almost comical, to feel protective over a child I barely knew, especially one living in such privilege. But the privilege I was beginning to see was a gilded cage. The injustice of it gnawed at me. My mother, in her small, crumbling home, battling a chronic illness, still managed to radiate warmth and love, even through grainy video calls. Here, in a house worth millions, a child was starving, not for food, but for connection. The polished surfaces, the expensive artwork, the designer furniture, it all seemed to mock the emptiness at the heart of this home. As the day drew to a close and I prepared to leave, I saw Lily again, standing at the expansive window, watching a squirrel scurry across the lawn. Her back was to me, her small frame silhouetted against the setting sun. She looked like a forgotten statue. I hesitated, a cleaning cloth still in my hand, a silent question forming in my mind. Should I say something? To whom? The nanny was still oblivious, humming along to music in her earbuds. Mrs. Sterling was nowhere to be seen, likely still buried in her work or out at some evening engagement. Mr. Sterling, a ghost in this narrative, was perpetually absent. The moral problem appeared starkly. An injustice so subtle it could easily be dismissed, yet so pervasive it threatened to consume a child. I was just the cleaner, a transient presence in their perfect world, but the image of Lily's solitary figure was etched onto my mind, a smudge I couldn't wipe away. I drove home through the deepening twilight, the luxurious mansions giving way to the bustling, grittier streets of my own neighborhood. My tiny apartment, though cramped and filled with the scent of cheap detergent, suddenly felt like a haven, a place where a child would never be left alone. Not really. The Sterling's house, for all its grandeur, felt like a mausoleum for a living heart. My second week at the Sterlings began with the same crisp autumn air and the same internal trepidation. My mind, usually focused on the meticulous details of my work, kept drifting to Lily. I'd spent the days between my shifts replaying the quiet moments, the unanswered questions in her eyes. I had to remind myself constantly that I was there to clean, not to intervene. Yet, the distinction was blurring. My observations of Lily intensified. I noticed that her clothes, though expensive, often looked a little rumpled, as if they'd been pulled from a pile rather than carefully chosen. Her hair was frequently uncombed. These were small things, easily overlooked, especially by someone not looking closely, but I was looking. I couldn't help it. The silence around Lily was not just the absence of sound, it was the absence of interaction. I never saw her share a laugh, a conversation, or even a fleeting touch with either of her parents or the nanny. It was as if she existed in a bubble, an invisible barrier separating her from the people meant to care for her. One afternoon, while I was carefully wiping down the ornate banister that curved majestically up to the second floor, I heard a faint sound. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sniffle coming from Lily's room. I hesitated, my hand gripping the polished bottle. It wasn't my place, but the sound, so vulnerable, tugged at something deep within me. I crept closer, my heart pounding a quiet rhythm against my ribs. The door was ajar. Lily was sitting on her vast, princess-themed bed, a large storybook open on her lap. But she wasn't reading. Her small shoulders were shaking, and a single silent tear tracked down her cheek. The nanny was downstairs, her pop music faintly audible from her earbuds. Lily was utterly alone in her sorrow. I wanted to rush in, to offer comfort, a hug, anything. But I froze, paralyzed by the fear of overstepping, of losing my job. I was a paid service, not a family member. The social contract was clear, but what about the moral one? The contrast between her opulent surroundings and her palpable sadness was jarring. It was a wound in the heart of the Sterling mansion, a silent scream that no one seemed to hear. It was later that day, as I was cleaning Lily's bedroom, that I found it. Tucked beneath her pillow, crumpled and well-worn, was a child's drawing. It wasn't the typical happy drawing you'd expect from a 7-year-old. It was a stick figure of a small girl, drawn in the center of a huge, empty house. The house had many windows, but no one was looking out and no one was looking in. Above the girl's head, drawn in shaky crayon, was a tiny cloud with 2 drops falling from it. Tears. It was a poignant, heartbreaking glimpse into her inner world, a stark visual representation of her isolation. It was an extra narrative block, a raw and undeniable piece of evidence. My stomach twisted. This wasn't shyness. This was deep, ingrained loneliness. This child was crying out for help in the only way she knew how, and it was being ignored. The drawing confirmed my deepest fears. This wasn't a phase. This was a pattern. My hand trembled as I carefully smoothed out the paper, tucking it back exactly where I'd found it, a silent promise forming in my heart. The very next week, a micro-trigger, almost mundane, solidified my concern. I overheard Mrs. Sterling on the phone in the kitchen, her voice sharp with irritation. "Lily, honestly, I'm on a call. Go play with your dolls or something." "No, I can't look at your drawing right now. Mommy's busy." Lily, who had approached her mother with a hopeful look and a piece of paper clutched in her hand, slowly retreated, her small shoulders slumping. Her face, usually so devoid of expression, showed a flicker of disappointment so profound it broke my heart. It was a small incident, easily dismissed, but it was 1,000 small incidents like these that built a wall around Lily. It wasn't just physical neglect. It was emotional starvation. This wasn't what rich parents were supposed to do, was it? Weren't they supposed to provide everything, including love? This wasn't how I was raised. My mother, with nothing, gave us everything that mattered. As I dusted the pristine dining room table, set with gleaming silverware that probably saw more formal dinners than family meals, the conflict within me escalated. What was my place? I was an outsider, a silent worker bee. But seeing Lily's crestfallen face, clutching her ignored artwork, made my stomach churn. You see a child like Lily, quiet and alone in a house that could swallow a small town, and you can't help but wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? I asked myself, the question a burning coal in my chest. Would I remain silent, preserving my job, my meager income, while a child withered away in plain sight? Or would I speak up, risking everything for a child I barely knew? My conscience was a relentless whisper, louder than the hum of the vacuum cleaner, louder than the distant traffic on the highway. It spoke of responsibility, of a fundamental human duty to protect the vulnerable. The opulence of the house, the sheer scale of their wealth, only served to amplify the tragedy. How could so much be given, and yet so little? The gilded cage shimmered beautiful and deadly. I decided then and there that I couldn't simply clean and forget. I couldn't be a passive witness. I had to do something, even if it was small, even if it was foolish. My first attempt, my false exit in this unfolding drama, was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not looking for it. While cleaning Lily's room, I noticed her old, slightly worn teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, sitting forlornly in a corner. I gently picked him up, fluffed his matted fur, and placed him prominently on her bed, arranging him as if he were guarding her. I then found a half-eaten bag of goldfish crackers, likely from days ago, tucked under her bed. Instead of just throwing them out, I left a fresh, unopened mini bag of goldfish crackers and a small carton of apple juice I had brought for my own lunch on her nightstand, hoping she'd find them. A tiny gesture of comfort from an anonymous hand. I knew it was risky, a breach of my invisible cleaner protocol, but I couldn't stop myself. My heart ached for her. My efforts, however, were futile in the face of such profound neglect. The next time I cleaned her room, Mr. Snuggles was back in his forlorn corner, and the goldfish crackers remained untouched, a silent testament to how little attention was paid to her space. It felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just that no one noticed, it was that no one cared to notice. Lily continued her silent vigil in the vast house, her gaze often drifting to me as I moved through the rooms, a silent observer in her silent world. There was no joy, no spark, just a deep-seated quietude that was beginning to frighten me. I started to notice other things, small yet significant. Lily's clothes, though high-end brands, often seemed to be the same ones for days. Her hair was frequently unbrushed, matted in the back. And then there was the smell. Not of dirt, not of uncleanliness, but a faint, cloying scent, like stale sweets and unwashed fabrics, emanating from her room. It was subtle, but it was there, a sign that perhaps her hygiene wasn't being properly managed. A micro-trigger, a chilling realization, came when I was emptying the trash in Lily's bathroom. Tucked beneath several used tissues, I found a small, empty bottle of children's Tylenol. Next to it, a half-used tube of antiseptic cream. And on the side of the bathtub, dried flakes of what looked like blood. My blood ran cold. The image of Lily's perfectly still body, her distant eyes, suddenly took on a sinister edge. Had she been hurt? Was she sick? And why had no one mentioned it? Why were these signs so carefully hidden beneath everyday refuse? My mind raced, piecing together fragments. The Tylenol, the antiseptic, the dried blood, her quietness, her parents' dismissiveness, the nanny's detachment. It painted a picture far darker than simple neglect. It hinted at something more insidious, something I couldn't reconcile with the pristine facade of the sterling home. My earlier attempts at a subtle intervention felt foolish, naive. This wasn't a problem that a perfectly placed teddy bear or a bag of crackers could fix. This was a deep, festering wound that needed more than a bandage. The problem wasn't just that Lily was alone, it was that she was unwell, possibly injured, and no one was taking notice. My hands started to shake as I finished cleaning the bathroom, the smell of bleach doing little to clear the unease in my head. I found myself hovering around Lily's room, listening, watching. I saw her briefly in the kitchen, being handed a plate of pre-packaged food by the nanny, who was, as usual, absorbed in her phone. Lily looked pale, her movements slower than usual. Her small elbow had a dark bruise on it, a bruise that hadn't been there before. My stomach lurched. It was a clear, undeniable sign. I wanted to confront someone, to scream, to demand answers, but I was just Maria, the cleaner. What power did I have against the Sterlings, people who could buy and sell me 1,000 times over? The truth, when it finally stared me in the face, was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, creeping horror. One Tuesday, arriving earlier than usual due to a scheduling change, I found the Sterling house eerily quiet. No nanny, no Mrs. Sterling's booming calls, just silence. As I started my routine, I heard a faint, persistent cough from upstairs. It was Lily. I went up, my heart a lead weight in my chest, and found her in her room, curled in a tight ball on her bed, her face flushed, shivering despite the warmth in the room. A small, almost empty water glass was on her nightstand. She was running a fever, clearly unwell and utterly alone. Her small body trembled. "Lily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and unfocused. "Mama," she mumbled, her voice raspy. She was delirious. Panic surged through me. I instinctively reached out, touching her forehead. It was burning hot. This wasn't right. She was sick and there was no one here. I searched for a phone, for a number for Mrs. Sterling or the nanny, but couldn't find one. As I frantically looked around her room, my gaze fell on an old, forgotten tablet tucked away beneath a pile of unused school books. I picked it up, hoping to find emergency contacts. The screen flickered to life, showing an old messaging app. It was open to a conversation between David Sterling and Eleanor Sterling. My fingers, almost against my will, scrolled back, and then I saw it, an extra narrative block that shattered everything, a text exchange from about 6 months ago. Eleanor: "Lily's still got that cough. She's complaining of an earache again. Dr. Schmidt thinks it's another infection. Honestly, David, this child is always sick. David, send her to your sister's for the weekend. I have that golf tournament and I can't be dealing with a sick kid right now. She'll be fine." Eleanor: "I tried. My sister says she has plans. I guess she'll just have to ride it out. I have that gala tonight, can't cancel." David: "Just give her some Tylenol. She's probably just looking for attention. She always does this when we're busy." Eleanor: "Agreed. So dramatic. I swear, sometimes I wish—" The text cut off there or was deleted. My breath hitched. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just neglect. This was a callous, systematic dismissal of a child's needs, bordering on emotional abuse. The Tylenol bottle, the antiseptic, the bruise on her arm. It wasn't an accident. It was the pattern of a child left to fend for herself, her pain trivialized, her very existence seen as an inconvenience. The perfect facade of the Sterlings, the gleaming house, the high-flying careers, it all crumbled into dust around me. The truth had come out, undeniable and brutal. The roles reversed. The seemingly successful, sophisticated parents were the truly guilty ones, and Lily, the quiet, almost invisible child, was the profound victim of their indifference. I looked at Lily, feverish and helpless, her small hand reaching out for a mother who saw her as a burden. My heart was a twisted knot of rage and sorrow. This wasn't just about a cleaning job anymore. This was about a human life, a small, fragile spirit being systematically broken. The weight of the truth pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. My professional detachment, the wall I had so carefully built around myself, crumbled entirely. I was no longer Maria, the cleaner, invisible and efficient. I was Maria, a human being witnessing a profound injustice, a silent cry that had resonated through the opulent halls of this house for far too long. I paced Lily's room, my mind a whirlwind of fear and fury. What could I do? What should I do? My job, my only source of income, hung precariously in the balance. Losing it meant not being able to send money home, meant my mother's medication, her meager comfort, would be jeopardized. It meant my own dreams of stability, however small, would shatter. But standing before me, lost in a feverish sleep, was a child. A child whose silent pleas had gone unanswered, whose parents, blinded by ambition and self-absorption, saw her as an impediment, a nuisance. This was the moral dilemma, the inescapable conflict that had been building inside me since my first day. Power versus pardon, money versus conscience, pride versus love. My choice would not be logical, it would be emotional, visceral. I looked around the room at the expensive toys, the designer clothes, the plush carpet, all the trappings of a privileged life that had failed to provide the one thing a child needs most: love and attention. My flaw, I realized with a sickening jolt, wasn't just that I was afraid to speak up. It was that I had allowed myself to be a silent observer for so long, rationalizing my inaction with the flimsy excuse of professionalism. I had become a complicit part of their system, a cog in the machine that enabled their neglect simply by keeping my mouth shut. The realization was a bitter pill, a painful self-discovery. My neutrality had made me part of the problem. The decision, when it finally came, felt less like a choice and more like an unavoidable surge, a torrent of emotion breaking through the dam of my fear. Lily coughed again, a weak, pathetic sound, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I simply couldn't walk away. I couldn't clean these floors, dust these surfaces, knowing what I now knew. My hands trembled, not from fear of losing my job, but from the weight of what I knew. Would you have risked everything for a child you barely knew, knowing the world would judge you? I asked the silent, empty room, my voice hoarse. The answer, for me, was a resounding, painful yes. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I searched for the number. Child Protective Services. It felt like an irreversible step, a leap into an unknown abyss. I made the call, my voice trembling but firm, relaying the details, the observations, the crushing evidence of neglect. As I spoke, the front door opened downstairs. Mrs. Sterling, radiating irritation, walked in, talking loudly on her phone. Honestly, the nanny called out sick, and I have to miss my spin class to deal with this. She didn't specify this, but I knew she meant Lily. She walked past the living room, heading towards the kitchen. I hung up the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs, and went downstairs. Mrs. Sterling looked up, her expression tightening into a frown. "Maria? What are you still doing here? And why are you holding your phone?" Her eyes, usually so cold, now held a glint of suspicion. "Mrs. Sterling," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "Lily is sick. She has a high fever. She needs a doctor." Mrs. Sterling scoffed, a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, she's fine. Probably just a little sniffle. She always exaggerates." Her words, so casual, ignited a fire within me. "No," I said, my voice rising. "She is not fine. She is burning up, and she has a bruise on her arm, and you leave her alone all the time, and you don't even look at her." The words poured out, years of suppressed frustration and a lifetime of empathy finally bursting forth. Mrs. Sterling's face contorted, her carefully constructed composure cracking. "How dare you? You're just the cleaner. Get out of my house. You're fired!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the vast, silent home. But it was too late. I had already made the call. The silence after her scream was deafening, filled only by the quiet hum of the luxury appliances and the sound of my own ragged breathing. It was over. My job was gone. But something else, something infinitely more precious, had been salvaged. The aftermath was a blur of police cars, social workers, and the piercing, indignant shrieks of Mrs. Sterling, her carefully manicured world crumbling around her. Mr. Sterling, summoned back from a business trip, arrived looking bewildered, then furious. He tried to intimidate me, to threaten me with legal action, but I stood my ground, clutching the crumpled drawing Lily had made, the one of the lonely girl in the empty house. The social worker, a kind woman named Ms. Evans, listened patiently to my story, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. Lily was taken to the hospital. Her fever was severe, and she had an ear infection and a mild concussion, likely from an unsupervised fall. It was worse than I had imagined. Justice, in a way, was served. Lily was removed from the Sterling's custody, placed temporarily with a loving foster family with the promise of a full investigation and potential charges against her parents for neglect and endangerment. The Sterling name, once synonymous with success and prestige, was now splashed across local headlines tainted by scandal. Their perfect lives, their carefully curated image, were shattered. But my own life, in the wake of my decision, felt irrevocably altered. I lost my job, of course. The Sterlings made sure no one in their exclusive circle would ever hire me again. Finding new work was a struggle, and the financial strain became immense. My mother's medical bills piled up, and the remittances I used to send became sporadic, then ceased altogether. The cost of my conscience was steep. There were days, lying awake in my small, cold apartment, when I questioned my choice. Was it worth it? Had I truly done the right thing, or had I just been a foolish, emotional cleaner who meddled where she shouldn't have? The ambiguity gnawed at me. Lily was safe, yes, but her future was still uncertain. And mine? It was harder than ever. Weeks turned into months. I picked up odd cleaning jobs here and there, barely making ends meet. One day, a small, handwritten card arrived in my mailbox. It was from Ms. Evans. Inside, a simple message. Lily is thriving. She talks about you, Maria. She calls you her angel. And tucked within the card was a small, vibrant drawing. It was Lily's handiwork again. This time, it depicted a smiling girl holding the hand of a woman with long, dark hair. Behind them, a bright, welcoming sun. It was a sun I hadn't seen in her previous drawing. A wave of profound emotion washed over me, a mix of relief, sorrow, and an undeniable sense of peace. The money was gone. My job, my financial security, was a distant memory. But the warmth that spread through my chest, the image of that smiling child, was a treasure no amount of money could buy. They say money can buy happiness, but can it buy peace? Can it buy a clear conscience? I often wonder, standing in my small apartment, if the true billionaires aren't those with the biggest bank accounts, but those who still know how to feel. The Sterling mansion stood silent now, cleaned but empty, and I realized some messes run too deep for any broom to ever reach.